Madame la vice-présidente de la Commission de l'Union africaine, présente également en ligne. Madame la conseillère technique du ministre de la Santé, de l'Hygiène publique et de la couverture maladie universelle de Côte d'Ivoire. Messieurs les directeurs généraux, distingués invités, tous pris en vos rangs, grades et qualités respectifs, permettez-moi de vous souhaiter la cordiale bienvenue à cet événement qui marque le lancement officiel de l'initiative AVAT NFCS, qui est le programme de compensation sans faute du Fonds africain pour l'acquisition des vaccins. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, allow me to welcome you to this event marking the official launch of the AVAT NFCS initiative, which is the African Vaccine Acquisition Trust No-Fault Compensation Scheme. Je n'oublie pas, bien sûr, tous les participants qui nous suivent en ligne à travers les liens mis à la disposition par l'organisation. Je n'oublie pas également les médias nationaux, internationaux qui sont avec nous dans cette salle, également en ligne et qui vont assurer la diffusion et la communication sur cet événement important. Merci à tous de nous avoir rejoints en ligne, en présentiel, dans cette salle de l'hôtel Radisson Blu pour cette cérémonie qui s'écoulera jusqu'aux environs de 12 heures avec un léger débordement, mais je suis sûre que vous aurez plaisir et énormément d'intérêt à rester avec nous jusqu'à ce moment-là. Je suis Soraya Diallo, vice-présidente senior de l'Agence panafricaine de notation financière Bloomfield Investment Corporation, et j'ai l'honneur d'être votre modérateur, pas modératrice, pour cette cérémonie. I am Soraya Diallo, and I am the Vice President, Senior Vice President of Bloomfield Investment Corporation, a Pan-African rating agency that is in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. Comme nous le savons tous, la pandémie de Covid-19 s'est étendue très rapidement dans l'ensemble du monde dès la fin de l'année 2019 et l'Afrique n'a pas été épargnée. Fermeture aux frontières, confinement partiel, couvre-feu, arrêt temporaire de certaines activités, les mesures prises par nos États afin de contenir l'impact de la crise sur les économies ont été diverses et variées, avec bien sûr des impacts également divers et variés sur nos économies. Mais en fin de compte, la catastrophe tant attendue pour l'Afrique ne s'est pas produite. Moins de malades, moins de morts, un impact économique moins important comparé à d'autres régions du monde. Ainsi, pour soutenir la reprise économique dans les pays africains et ralentir la propagation de la pandémie, des campagnes de vaccination ont été lancées à travers le continent, encouragées notamment par le programme COVAX de l'OMS. Des promesses de dons ont été faites, des millions de doses ont été reçues, mais qui sont restées relativement insuffisantes en quantité, quelquefois en qualité, pour permettre de combler les besoins très importants de l'Afrique. Pour permettre donc l'atteinte de l'objectif ambitieux de faire vacciner au moins 70% de la population africaine d'ici la fin 2022, tout en améliorant l'accès aux vaccins pour les populations vulnérables, les États africains ont décidé de prendre la responsabilité de la santé de leur population à travers une initiative commune, l'AVAT, financée conjointement et portée par l'Union africaine, les CDC d'Afrique, la Commission économique pour l'Afrique et l'Afreximbank. Cependant, outre la mise à disposition en quantité, en qualité et en temps opportun des doses de vaccins aux populations africaines, il s'avère également nécessaire de renforcer la confiance des populations envers ces vaccins envers ces campagnes. Et c'est là tout le sens de l'initiative AVAT NFCS qui va être lancée aujourd'hui. Pour nous en parler plus en détail, j'inviterai tout à l'heure Madame Samali Kihindi, directrice des services juridiques d'Afreximbank, pour nous faire sa présentation. Avant d'être nommée à ce poste, donc directrice des services juridiques à Afreximbank, Madame Kihindi a travaillé en tant que consultante indépendante, conseillant les entreprises et les organismes de réglementation sur le développement des marchés de capitaux en Afrique, après avoir occupé divers postes de directrice, de responsable du Securitization, Regulatory, Policy and Advisory Group à la Deutsche Bank à Londres et d'associé principal chez Clifford Chance à Londres également. Elle a mené les discussions relatives à la structuration des solutions de financement en vue de déployer le système d'approvisionnement panafricain pour les vaccins Covid à travers la création d'un SPV unique dont elle nous parlera. Mrs. Kihindi, I would like to ask you to do me the favor to come to this podium in order to give you opening remarks, please. Sous vos applaudissements, merci de bien vouloir recevoir Madame Kihindi.
The Special Envoy to the African Union on COVID-19 and coordinator of the African Vaccine Task Team, Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, Your Excellency, President and Chairman of the African Export-Import Bank, Your Excellency, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, Your Excellency, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors and members of the Diplomatic Corps, the Deputy Director of the Africa CDC, the Regional Chief Operating Officer of Francophone West Africa for Afreximbank, members of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Today is a celebration. It is a celebration of the African Vaccine Acquisition Trust, AVAT, which over the past 12 months has procured more than 200 million vaccines for Africa and the Caribbean. It is also a celebration of the AVAT no-fault compensation scheme, which has been put in place to ensure that any individual that receives a vaccine through the AVAT framework has the comfort of knowing that should they suffer a serious injury, they will receive compensation. And lastly, it is a celebration of Africa and its visionary leaders. AVAT is an innovative and unique framework. And it marks the first time the continent has ever entered into a commercial contract together to protect its population. We will be hearing from some of these visionary leaders during the course of this program. But before we do, I would like to quickly explain why the no-fault compensation scheme is important and also explain how it works. COVID-19 changed the world. In an unprecedented shared global experience, many countries were shut down for months on end. Businesses closed, families were separated, and sadly, too many lives were lost. However, the rapid development of COVID-19 vaccines has meant that the world is now slowly beginning to open up and gradually returning to a sense of normalcy. Governments across the world have been urging their citizens to take the vaccine. Not just for their benefit, but also for the benefit of their communities as a whole. Given this request, the idea behind the no-fault compensation scheme is that in addition to the assurances of safety in relation to the vaccine, which have been given by the World Health Organization and health regulators across the world, individuals that take vaccines have the comfort of knowing that in the unlikely event they suffer a serious injury, they will be taken care of. This is particularly significant in the context of Africa and the Caribbean, where many people do not have access to universal health care or medical insurance. Such a continental compensation scheme is unprecedented in Africa and will hopefully inspire greater trust in the vaccine and greater uptake. So how does the vaccine work? Each time an African country or a Caribbean country makes a purchase of a vaccine through the AVAT framework, they also pay an additional levy on each dose. This goes into a pool which is used to service compensation claims. For individuals who wish to make a claim, there are 3 key steps. Step 1 is the waiting period. Step 2 is the application itself. And step 3 is the assessment. So step 1, the waiting period. Other than in the case of death, an individual must wait at least 30 days before making an application. This is to ensure that non-serious claims are filtered out. For example, a very sore arm or a terrible headache that might subside after a few days. After step 1 is the application stage. If an individual feels that they have suffered a serious injury, they then make an application. All the information around how to make an application, as well as a step-by-step guide, can be found on the scheme's website, avatclaims.com. This website is available in French, English, and Portuguese. The application broadly requires 2 steps: filling in an application form, which can be done online on your computer, online on your mobile phone, or manually, and then submitting supporting documentation from a registered health professional. For example, your family doctor or a registered health official at the facility where you received your vaccine. Importantly, there is no application fee. Furthermore, an individual does not have to prove fault by any party. They merely need to show that the most probable cause of their injury was the vaccine. The third step is the assessment, and this is carried out by a specialist claims administrator who have put in place a dedicated review panel to review such claims. If a claim is deemed to be successful, compensation will be paid. This can be paid in US dollars or local currency, depending on the preference of the applicant. If an application is not successful at this stage, an applicant has the option of making an appeal to an appeals panel, which is comprised of registered health professionals who review the initial decision. The review panel and the appeals panel are assisted by a special advisory committee, which is comprised of 6 internationally renowned epidemiologists, scientists, and physicians who regularly provide the most up-to-date research on COVID-19 in Africa and the Caribbean for the review panel and appeals panel to consider. All this information, together with helpful guides, can be found at the website, avatclaims.com. The scheme also has a telephone hotline, as well as a WhatsApp help desk to guide applicants through the process. In conclusion, the no-fault compensation scheme has been established to provide individuals with greater comfort in taking the vaccine. And if there's one thing that you take away from this presentation, let it be this: the scheme's website, avatclaims.com. Hopefully, you will never have to use it. But in the event that you do, you can take comfort in knowing that it has been designed to be easily accessible and free to use in order to protect you and your families. And in closing, I would like to leave you with a short video on AVAT and the AVAT no-fault compensation scheme. Thank you.
The African Union, together with leading institutions, took a historic step to secure vaccines on behalf of citizens. The African Vaccine Acquisition Trust, AVAT, was established in collaboration with the African CDC, the Vaccine Bank, and the fight against COVID-19. AVAT allows African and American states to collectively purchase vaccines for their citizens. It is supported by a $2 billion guarantee from a vaccine bank to vaccine manufacturers, enabling Africa to secure its share of approved global vaccine manufacturing capacity. In further recognition of the needs of African citizens, especially given the speed of vaccine development and deployment, AVAT has also established an assurance scheme to compensate all individuals suffering serious side effects as a result of receiving a vaccine. Those side effects are extremely unlikely. All vaccines were received and approved by the World Health Organization, Africa CDC, and the US FDA. The AVAT no-fault compensation scheme provides a one-stop portal offering no-fault website compensation for a fair settlement of successful claims. The process is swift, transparent, and without fees. Managed by a reputable international claims administrator, it has been designed to guarantee independent assessment with an equitable remedy provided faster than any court litigation. Eligibility can be checked quickly and simply in advance by reference to the scheme's protocol that provides details of conditions that need to be met in order for the application to be accepted and/or a compensation payment made. To summarize the key points, AVAT claim must wait for at least 30 days before applying, as any side effect must be shown to be serious. There is no requirement to profile by any party, just the need to demonstrate that there is a causal link between the side effect and the vaccine. The claims process only applies to vaccines distributed within the AVAT framework and only applies in circumstances where side effects are deemed to be serious and long-term. All relevant application forms and guidelines will be publicly available online at avatclaims.com. Clients are free to choose how to apply, and online, by email or by post. Your own compensation payments will be calculated in US dollars. Finally, note that the help desk will also be available with contact offered by email, phone, and WhatsApp to assist claimants. The AVAT no-fault compensation scheme utilizes and underlines the commitment of the Africa CDC, a vaccine bank, and the World Economic Commission for Africa to serve the best interests of the African continent and its people at all times. Together they are united to protect.
Mesdames et messieurs, je vous demanderai de bien vouloir l'applaudir pour sa présentation, Madame Kayindi. Au cours de cette cérémonie, nous aurons différentes allocutions des partenaires principaux au projet AVAT NFCS qui auront l'occasion de vous présenter encore plus en détail ce programme. Je retiens cependant de la présentation faite à l'instant par Madame Kayindi 2 éléments. L'Afrique a pris le leadership avant le monde entier pour mettre en place un programme de compensation unique et gratuit. Mais cela n'aurait pas été possible sans le soutien important, le soutien financier très fort d'une institution qui est Afreximbank. Ce programme a été porté par professeur Bénédicte Orama, President et Chairman of the Board de Afreximbank, qui a une excellente connaissance des mécanismes de financement depuis déjà l'époque où, vice-président exécutif en charge du développement commercial et des services bancaires aux entreprises, il supervisait les départements et unités de développement commercial de la banque, le financement du commerce, les succursales, le financement des projets du développement des exportations, les syndications, les financements spécialisés, le financement des entreprises et du conseil. Pour la présentation du contexte qui a soutenu la mise en œuvre de cette nouvelle initiative, j'ai l'insigne honneur de recevoir à ce pupitre professeur Bénédicte Orama, président de Afreximbank, que je vous demande de bien vouloir accompagner de vos applaudissements.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremony. Excellency, Dr. Monique Sanzabagawa, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, representing His Excellency Usafaki Mahamat, Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Welcome you online. Mr. Kofi Aka Charles, Chief of Staff, the Minister of Health of the Republic of Cote d'Ivoire, representing the Honorable Minister. Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers have joined us virtually. Strive Masiwa, Special Envoy to the African Union on COVID-19 Logistics and Coordinator of the Africa Vaccine Acquisition Task Team. Your Excellency, Dr. Vera Songwe, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, so joining virtually. Dr. Ahmed Ogwell, Deputy Director of the Africa CDC. Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, members of the Diplomatic Corps, our colleagues at Afreximbank, especially the team that worked on this, led by Somali, Vovinenga, and of course all the other teams that worked and continue to work on the AVAT, when Kwabena, Kene, and so many others I cannot call today, in Afreximbank and in UNECA, Africa CDC, and ECONET. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the management and board of Afreximbank, I welcome you all to this ceremony of the formal launch of the African Vaccine Acquisition Trust No-Fault Compensation Scheme. The event we are celebrating today, as Somali aptly captured, is the outcome of months of hard work and determination by the African Vaccine Acquisition Task Team, Afreximbank, the UN Economic Commission for Africa, Africa CDC, and many other stakeholders, including those who supported us as we went through that journey, the WHO, the COVAX, and Gavi, and UNICEF. It's also historic, as the AVAT NFCS is arguably the first ever scheme of its type developed and implemented at continental level. We are all aware of the unprecedented challenges that the world has faced and is still facing as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. As we all know, the pandemic became central to almost everything we are doing, every plan, every project, every initiative that we undertook in the past 2 years. So today is a celebration of not just the AVAT 04 compensation scheme, but also of AVAT itself, in order to facilitate the procurement and acquisition of vaccines for its people. The African Union created the COVID-19 Africa Vaccine Acquisition Task Team. That task team was created in November 2020 by His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, who was then the chairperson of the African Union. The AVAT is coordinated by Mr. Strive Masiwa, the AU Special Envoy on the COVID-19 logistics and founder of ECONET. The objectives of the task team were to put in place a whole of Africa approach to the procurement of COVID-19 procurement materials, of containment materials, as well as to help arrange the financing that will enable those procurements. The task team was also tasked to work with member states of the African Union and key partners to procure and deliver vaccines towards achieving a target of covering a minimum of 60% of Africa's population. AVAT then went on to partner with the African Export-Import Bank to develop the Advanced Procurement Commitment Framework, which underpinned the financing that was implemented and which supported the procurement of 400 million doses of Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccines currently being delivered to a broad spectrum of African countries today. It marked the first time Africa as a continent, as a people, work together to make such a large acquisition. The task team established the Africa Vaccine Acquisition Trust to act as the centralized negotiating, contracting, and purchasing agent for the COVID-19 vaccines on behalf of the African Union member states and the Caribbean countries who had signed up to the Advanced Procurement Commitment Framework. As I said earlier, that it was a very unique and of course, very daunting undertaking, and I must take the opportunity to thank all our colleagues who worked day and night to make this possible. Don't think it's ever happened anywhere. During the last 2 years, AVAT principals, namely Mr. Masiwa, Dr. Vera Songwe, Executive Secretary of the UNECA, Dr. John Kengason, who was there, the Director of Africa CDC, and myself, worked with our colleagues from our respective organizations to ensure that the COVID-19 vaccines were not only acquired, but also distributed to African and Caribbean countries as contracted with Johnson & Johnson. AVAT facilitated the $2 billion guarantee that Afrexim Bank issued, which then enabled the procurement of the vaccine doses I earlier alluded to. It also worked to implement the $500 million of assistance donation that were received from the MasterCard Foundation, as well as donations from the MTN Group and others. It also collaborated with the World Bank Group, who provided expedited facilities that helped make it possible for many African countries to meet their payment obligations to Afreximbank. AVAT also worked closely with the governments of the USA, France, and others to facilitate bilateral vaccine donations to Africa. And on behalf of our colleagues at AVAT, I would like to use this occasion to also thank each and every one of these donors. While paying attention to vaccine delivery, AVAT recognizes that individuals in all member states must feel confident that their governments will take care of them fairly and swiftly if they became seriously injured by a vaccine. This was necessary given the extraordinary circumstances that led to a very expedited delivery, production of vaccines that were used or have been used and are still being used to deal with the pandemic. And it is to provide this assurance and satisfy one of the requirements of the COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers that AVAT introduced the AVAT No-Fault Compensation Scheme. The scheme serves to provide no-fault lump sum compensation in full and final settlement of any claims for expected and unexpected serious adverse events arising from vaccines procured or distributed through the AVAT framework. The objective of this scheme is not only to offer comfort that compensation is available, but it's also to further encourage vaccine uptake by inspiring a high level of trust in the vaccine. I am pleased to confirm that the scheme went live in October 2021 and is the first Africa-wide and Caribbean compensation scheme of its kind. There are currently 41 participating African states and Caribbean states. Our hope is that the AVAT No-Fault Compensation Scheme becomes a permanent feature of Africa's health resilience framework and be used as a response mechanism to future public health emergencies. We will therefore not need to start from the scratch whenever we are confronted with such emergencies. We are cognizant of the fact that implementation is not an easy task, but are confident that if we join our efforts, we will be in a position to proudly say that Africa has a robust and viable no-fault compensation system in place, which can rival anywhere in the world. For the foregoing, we would like to recommend that given the current rollout of vaccines, that all African countries should quickly join the scheme. And this call is an urgent call. It has become even more urgent given that the African Union has made a decision to institutionalize the scheme as an important continent-wide healthcare soft infrastructure. So every country that is yet to be a member should join, because this scheme will underpin the work the Africa CDC, the African Medicine Agency, and others will do. And it will make Africa a stronger and a better place from a public health perspective. Permit me to also specifically address the governments and ministries of health in participating African and Caribbean countries. The AVAT No Fault Compensation Scheme belongs to you and your people. The scheme not only protects the public by providing a swift and easy process to access compensation, it also is of great benefit to governments by reducing any potential litigation. Don't forget that many countries are asking their citizens to get vaccinated because that is the right thing to do given the emergency we face. It is a public health emergency. But those who feel that they have been harmed by the vaccines may turn around to sue the government. The AVAT No Fault Compensation Scheme provides a cover to the government should such an event happen, just as it covers also the individuals. It is a win-win for everybody, and the government, as a service to their people, must do more to ensure that their citizens go and understand what it offers. So governments must please help us to spread the word to encourage greater vaccine uptake and also ensure that individuals are aware that they have access to this safety net in the unlikely event that they suffer an adverse reaction or event from taking the vaccines AVAT has delivered. As I close, I would like to assure you all that our Afreximbank is committed to supporting initiatives that solve continental problems. That is why we are created. Permit me now to thank my fellow members of the Africa Vaccine Acquisition Trust, our donors, the MasterCard Foundation, the MTN Group, governments of the USA, France, and others, our numerous other partners, COVAX, GLT, MASH, Gavi, WHO, UNICEF, World Bank, and colleagues who worked very hard to see that the scheme came alive, and the ECIS, who are the administrators, as well as our lawyers, Slaughter and May, for their assistance in the setup of this unique scheme. Special thanks to Dr. Monique, the Deputy Chairperson of the AU, for her support, as well as the entire AU system for the work, for the support they've given and continue to give to the AVAT framework. On behalf of the Board of Directors of our Afreximbank, I would like to thank you all for your attention and participation in today's event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Orama, for this insightful details on the program and on the engagement of Afreximbank for this initiative. En effet, à travers votre présentation, nous avons vu l'importance que peut avoir l'accompagnement du secteur privé aux côtés du public pour la réussite de ce type de coopération en termes de développement économique de l'Afrique. Ceci est d'ailleurs l'un des axes stratégiques prônés par la Commission économique des Nations Unies pour l'Afrique, l'UNECA, pour laquelle le développement économique et social du continent est une priorité, guidant ainsi son engagement aux côtés de ses différents partenaires pour lutter contre la pandémie. Pour nous en parler, Dr Vera Sangwe, secrétaire exécutive de la Commission économique pour l'Afrique, qui n'a malheureusement pas pu faire le déplacement sur Abidjan, interviendra à travers une vidéo. Dr Sangwe a été directrice régionale de la SFI, directrice nationale de la Banque mondiale et conseillère du directeur général de la Banque mondiale pour l'Afrique, l'Europe, l'Asie centrale et du Sud. Après sa nomination à la Commission économique pour l'Afrique. Elle est devenue la première femme à diriger cette institution en 60 ans d'histoire et la fonctionnaire régionale ayant le rang le plus haut aux Nations Unies. Je vous demande de rester attentifs à la vidéo qui va suivre avec l'intervention du Dr Vera Songwe. La régie, je pense qu'on a un léger souci.
Board of Directors of the African Export-Import Bank, Mr. Strive Masiwia, Chairman of EcoNet Global and Special Envoy of the African Union, distinguished representatives of the African Union Commission and the Africa CDC, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It gives me great pleasure to be part of this auspicious occasion. Today is very significant for Africa and an important milestone in the fight against COVID-19 pandemic as we officially launch the AVAT No-Fault Compensation Scheme. I want to start by congratulating the African Union heads of states for their vision and leadership that has led us to this point during the ongoing COVID crisis led by His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa and the African Union champion on the COVID-19 pandemic response. I also want to congratulate Africa CDC and Afreximbank for being catalysts of change and for their action and persistent fight to find a solution during the COVID-19 crisis. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa is proud to have worked with you and to be a partner of the African Vaccine Acquisition Trust. We know too well the devastating impacts that COVID-19 has had and continues to have on Africa. The pandemic has led to the loss of lives and has pushed about 55 million people into extreme poverty. The pandemic has also exposed certain pre-existing vulnerabilities, stalled and reversed slow progress towards improved welfare and the achievement of Agenda 2030 and Africa's Agenda 2063. It is against this backdrop that AVAT is so important and a game changer for the continent at the forefront of the biggest immunization operations of our time. By acting as a centralized negotiating, purchasing and payment agent on behalf of the African Union member states and CARICOM member states, the AVAT is a sterling example of how financial and pool procurement is being used to secure COVID-19 vaccines at the best prices and for the scale needed for the continent at large to reach at least 60% of the continent's population vaccinated. Through AVAT, Africa has not only spearheaded global efforts on fair distribution of COVID-19 vaccines in the face of weak global multilateralism, it is serving as a catalyst for Africa to relook at its healthcare systems and move to ramp up local manufacturing capacity for vaccines. Today, Africa will go a step further to put its people first, recognizing the speed at which vaccines need to be deployed and the urgency with which governments need to vaccinate citizens to save lives and livelihoods. The AVAT No-Fault Compensation Scheme for participating member states is a revolutionary, a one-of-a-kind system in Africa. It provides eligible vaccine recipients with access to prompt, fair, and transparent compensation serious adverse events associated with COVID-19 vaccinations procured by AVAT. This scheme is also a vital cost-saving measure. African nations cannot afford more lockdowns. ECA estimates that 1 month of lockdowns across Africa will cost us 2.5% of our GDP or $65 billion. It is therefore important that African ministers of health promote the scheme to their populations in their strategies to ramp up distribution and vaccination uptake to save lives, allay fears of being vaccinated, and to mitigate pressures on already strained healthcare systems, as well as avert the crippling cost of lockdowns and productivity. The innovation behind the No-Fault Compensation Scheme is just but one of the innovations that Africa has undertaken during this time of crisis. We look forward, of course, to seeing many more innovations that protect Africa's lives, that ensure that our markets are functional and that our institutions continue to provide the kind of support that is needed in times of crisis. The Afreximbank has been at the forefront of providing the support needed to many countries, not just in the health sector, but also in the tradable sector, in the private sector, where we need, of course, to look to for growth, on ensuring that even during this crisis, the AFCFTA continues to be built upon with payment systems that they have just launched and other facilities that have been made available to countries in need. Nelson Mandela once said, it's impossible until it is done. Africa has shown that when left with itself, it can devise innovative solutions to not only to save our health and our lives, but to save our livelihoods. And the African Union, the Africa CDC, the Africa Import-Export Bank, working under the leadership of the AU Special Envoy, Mr. Strive Masiwiya, have demonstrated that Africa can when it wants. And once again, I want to thank the team, especially that has been working on the no-fault compensation clause, for all the effort that they have put to getting us to where we are today. It is only but a beginning in the build-up of Africa's financial institutions. Thank you for your attention.
Merci, merci pour vos applaudissements. J'espère que tous nos participants en ligne nous suivent bien et prennent également beaucoup d'intérêt à suivre les différentes allocutions des partenaires du projet. Je pense que cette crise nous a appris que les défis communs doivent faire l'objet d'une réponse commune, d'une réponse globale, d'une réponse solidaire de l'Afrique. Et elle nous a aussi appris que l'Afrique peut prendre le leadership à travers ses dirigeants, à travers son secteur privé, et être capable de développer des programmes, des modèles qui peuvent pouvoir s'appliquer au monde entier. Les questions africaines requièrent des réponses africaines. Et il faut que cela, nous puissions le mettre en valeur le plus souvent possible. Au-delà des différentes institutions qui se sont associées à ce projet, nous devons également relever des personnalités du continent, des personnalités du secteur privé, qui ont également été remarquables par leur soutien. C'est le cas de M. Strive Masiwiya, fondateur et président exécutif de Econet Group, ardent défenseur du discours positif sur l'Afrique. Il est présent au board de plusieurs multinationales, comme Unilever, Bank of America, et est surtout, depuis plus de 30 ans, l'un des entrepreneurs phares de la transformation numérique du continent. Il a été nommé envoyé spécial de l'Union africaine pour aider à coordonner les efforts du secteur privé africain en matière d'approvisionnement en fournitures médicales pour lutter contre la propagation de la pandémie. Monsieur Strive n'a pu être avec nous également aujourd'hui et je vous invite donc à suivre en vidéo son intervention.
By now, most of you are familiar with the epic battle to secure vaccines for the African continent. As I've said before, history will probably record this as one of the major breakthroughs in African unity, how our countries came together for the first time to go into the market to purchase something as a continent. Almost 50 countries in Africa and the Caribbean created a buying consortium and raised over $3 billion through Afri-Exim Bank to purchase these vaccines. Few people know of the emergency meetings by finance ministers of Africa, led by countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Egypt, how they came together to create this buying consortium we now call AVAT and the Africa Medical Supplies Platform. Really, Africa owes an incredible debt to the leadership provided by President Benedict Ramaphosa. One of the major challenges once we had secured the funding was the fact that we were dealing with new vaccines. The vaccines for this disease were all new, which meant we needed to create a no-fault compensation scheme. And the manufacturers all said, unless you have such a scheme, we cannot sell you vaccines. You have to be able to compensate anyone yourselves. And we went around the world asking how others were dealing with this. And we were told flat out that it's impossible. It's impossible to have your own no-fault compensation scheme in such a short time span. And I remember sitting down with Professor Orama and the AVAT team, Dr. Vera Songwe, John Kengasong, and others. And we debated this, and Professor Orama just turned around and says, you know, we deal with some of the world's leading insurance companies, the reinsurers. Let's call them into the room and let's see if we cannot set up our own scheme. This was unprecedented. And in the time that it took, I remember discussing with WHO, and they said, well, it took us a year for the COVAX to put a similar scheme in place, and we're still working. How can you guys say you can have it up and running in just a few months? But we did. We did. Afreximbank, true to its commitment, brought in major players like Chubb and others, and brought in international lawyers from London who were specialists in this field. And they began drafting and preparing the scheme. I mean, I could have cried. I mean, seeing it come together. And then we run it past the member states. Many member states' attorney generals were involved in looking at the legal structures. And everybody said, we are happy with this, let's go. And it is because of this that we as AVAT were able to go out into the market and begin to purchase vaccines and deliver them to the African member states and to the Caribbean member states. The scheme takes a small percentage on each vaccine delivery. So we now have our own fund which supports this. But more important, we've created a precedent. There's so many extraordinary precedences that are coming from what we did in the time of this crisis. And I hope other generations after us will look at this. These are the assets that we are bequeathing to the African nations for the next generation that are building the Africa Free Trade Area. We can do it. We can build structures that enable us to project the power of Africa. We are a continent of 1.3 billion people. We have a GDP of $2.5 trillion. We are as big as India in terms of GDP. We're bigger than Russia in terms of GDP. We can be respected for our buying capability and strength, but we have to do it together. We have to build structures like this. We have to be bold. We have to take on the challenges that are thrown at us. We didn't choose COVID, but we took on COVID, and we are beating COVID. Today, when we look at the mortality, a lot of people have died, and one life lost anywhere in the world is a tragedy. Yet when we look at our situation, Africa had an extraordinarily low mortality rate compared to many advanced countries, because we were working together. We were working with health ministers. We were working with finance ministers. We're working with heads of state. We're meeting every single month. Africa can be proud of this. We can be proud of this. In the midst of a challenge, this generation rose to meet that challenge and to protect Africa. Let's continue to build on this. Thank you very much. And congratulations. You have a new African institution. Look after it. Let's build it. Thank you very much. God bless you.
C'était une très belle présentation de M. Strive Massillé. Et oui, l'Afrique est riche. Le continent recèle de nombreuses richesses naturelles, diverses et variées. Je le disais tout à l'heure, il nous faut apprendre encore plus et encore plus souvent et encore plus fortement à mettre les forces, les compétences, l'ensemble des capacités financières, humaines, naturelles de l'Afrique au service de l'Afrique. Vous avez dû noter dans le programme que nous devions avoir une intervention en live du docteur Monique, vice-présidente de l'Union africaine. Malheureusement, le docteur est en ce moment un peu contrainte. On espère qu'elle pourra se libérer d'ici la fin de cette cérémonie pour que nous puissions avoir au moins quelques mots de sa part. Elle interviendra en direct. En attendant, nous allons continuer le fil des allocutions avec la participation notamment de Africa CDC. Dans le contexte de mise en valeur et de mise ensemble des capacités de l'Afrique, l'Africa CDC s'est associée à cette initiative panafricaine. Et pour nous en parler, pour nous parler de leur engagement dans ce sens, Dr Ahmed Ogwel, qui est actuellement le premier directeur adjoint de Africa CDC, une agence spécialisée de l'Union africaine, interviendra en live tout à l'heure. Au titre de ses fonctions, il travaille en étroite collaboration avec les gouvernements et d'autres institutions partenaires pour préserver la santé et le bien-être des nations africaines et de leur population. Dr Ogwel a plus de 25 ans d'expérience dans le domaine de la santé publique, au niveau national, au niveau régional, au niveau mondial, avec des gouvernements nationaux, des organisations non gouvernementales, le système des Nations Unies, ainsi que l'Union africaine. Je vous demanderai, ainsi qu'à nos participants en ligne, d'être attentifs à l'intervention en live du Dr Ogwel et n'hésitez pas non plus à noter vos préoccupations, à noter vos questions qui pourraient faire l'objet de traitement à l'issue de cette cérémonie par les organisateurs. Dr Ogwel, if you are connected, we are all yours.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good morning, good evening to those joining online from wherever you are. From Africa CDC, it is a pleasure to be here to join in this very important milestone for the continent. Your Excellency, the Deputy Chairperson of the Africa Union Commission, President of the Afrexim Bank, the Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa, Special Envoy of the AU for COVID-19, all protocols observed. I bring you a warm greetings from Africa CDC, and indeed it is an honor to speak at this auspicious occasion. I would like to pass 3 messages today. The first is how critical working together has been for this small team that we call the African Vaccines Acquisition Task Team and eventually African Vaccines Acquisition Trust. Second message is how that togetherness and working as a team has impacted on our work as Africa CDC. And finally is how we see this going forward. So let me start with the African Vaccines Acquisition Task Team, and this has already been explained very well by previous speakers. What has stood out for us as at Africa CDC is the enthusiasm and the passion that this team has put into their mandate. Indeed, the extra mile that they have gone to make sure that this mandate has been met and has been met in a very successful way. As Strive Masiwa has just shared with us, this is really the first time that Africa has stepped up, has planned, negotiated, bought, and distributed its own vaccines at this scale. And it is something that we must be proud of as Africans and use it as a stepping stone for us to do even more going into the future. So this team, the African Vaccines Acquisition Task Team, has opened a very important door for public health. Indeed, it has opened a very important door for Africa to be able to do similar things in all other sectors that we prioritize. We thank the team, and as Africa CDC, being part of it has been a learning experience. It has made us see the workings of other sectors apart from health. It has made us realize just how important it is for us to be able to come together. Secondly, is this work has made our work as Africa CDC a lot easier. It made us be able to stand tall and tell Africa that vaccines are coming. And indeed they came. It made us stand tall and put together our national regulatory authorities and ask them to take up the responsibility of pronouncing these vaccines as safe and efficacious. And they did that across the continent. It made our work easier because then we could be able to communicate with confidence that our continent, although we have been pushed to the back of the line in as far as vaccines are concerned, but we did not come out with zero. The lessons we learned during HIV came into play, and AVAT has made it possible for us to do our work even more effectively on the continent. Finally, is looking forward. How do we translate the lessons of AVAT? Indeed, how do we translate this non-compensation system into making health systems even stronger, making our preparedness on the continent even better, and making our response to any disease threat timely and efficient? As Africa CDC and the Africa Union, we have identified a set of principles and pillars that if we implement, we should be better prepared for the next epidemic, for the next pandemic. And we call them Africa's new public health order. There are 5 pillars on this order. The first is to strengthen institutions on the continent. And we have many institutions that are contributing to health security agenda on the continent. Africa CDC, the Africa Medicines Agency, the Africa Medical Supplies Platform, AVAT itself, the Africa Union Development Agency out at NEPAD, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat. All these and others at the continental level are contributing towards making public health easier to manage on the continent. And that first pillar tells us that we must strengthen our health institutions on the continent, and then we go and strengthen the health institutions at country level. The second pillar is workforce development. We need on this continent to strengthen our all the professionals that work towards making public health safer, making Africa safer. And it goes beyond health workers, although those are the key, but it will include lawyers, it will include engineers, because all of them contribute to the larger response of public health. But we need each and every cadre of professionals to be trained well and to be distributed across the continent to be able to respond to any disease threat. So second pillar is strengthening our workforce on the continent. The third pillar is local manufacturing. One painful lesson that we learned is that if we do not have control over our health commodities, as simple as masks or as complicated as vaccines, then we cannot be able to plan and respond effectively. So our heads of states have been very clear with us that we must secure our supply chain. We start producing all that we need here on the continent. And we have started that journey, and we look forward to walking that journey together so that we can have local manufacturing of all the health commodities that we need. The fourth pillar is partnerships. Africa coming into this space when others are already doing similar activities means that we need to have strong partnerships. But these partnerships must be based on Africa's priorities, and these partnerships must be based on action with results. The fifth pillar is domestic resources. That before we ask friends of Africa to step in and support our work, we must secure resources here on the continent. Our government's contribution, our private sector contribution, our indigenous philanthropies contribution, our individual experts contribution, and contribution by members of the public needs to be brought together so that we can be able to prepare, plan, and respond whenever any disease threat comes on the continent. Innovation is at the core of everything that we need to do going forward. And what the AVAT compensation scheme has brought forward is even more innovation into the field of healthcare. Just as we innovated with the Africa Medical Supplies Platform and we innovated with the African Vaccines Acquisition Trust, we are now innovating with this scheme. It makes us more confident that every vaccine dose that is going to be put into the arm of an African here on the continent is safe and it is efficacious. I thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to expanding this journey of innovation and implementation of the new public health order here on the continent. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ogwell, for these interesting remarks. À la suite du directeur adjoint de Africa CDC, nous avons l'intervention non programmée, mais qui nous fait un plaisir immense, du directeur sortant de Africa CDC, Dr. John Nkengasong. Il interviendra également en live. Est-ce qu'il est connecté? Ah oui. Ce sont les aléas du direct, comme l'on dirait. Nous attendons qu'il puisse nous rejoindre sur la chaîne live pour son intervention. Merci encore à tous d'être avec nous jusqu'à cette heure-ci et j'espère que vous prenez beaucoup de plaisir et que vous trouvez, tout comme moi, que ces différentes interventions sont énormément enrichissantes. J'ai appris effectivement énormément sur l'initiative de AVAT, sur le NFIS, et ce que j'aimerais retenir, c'est qu'il faut une communication plus poussée, une diffusion au niveau des médias plus large sur cette initiative pour que chaque Africain puisse se l'approprier, pour que chaque Africain, comme l'ont très bien souligné les intervenants, Dr Vera Songwe, le Dr Ogwe, M. Strive Masikila, pour que donc chaque Africain soit fier de pouvoir dire que nous avons été leaders dans une telle initiative, pour que chaque Africain sache qu'il y a un programme qui existe, qui est pris en main et sous la responsabilité de son gouvernement, de ses institutions, pour assurer la santé des populations. Donc j'invite les organisateurs, les partenaires au programme à assurer une diffusion beaucoup plus large de cette initiative. Personnellement, je n'en ai été réellement informée qu'à l'occasion de l'organisation de cette cérémonie, en faisant donc de la recherche, et je me suis sentie très interpellée. Je vous le disais d'entrée de jeu, je suis vice-présidente senior de l'agence Bloomfield Investment Corporation. Et Bloomfield, à l'instar d'Afreximbank, à l'instar de toutes ces institutions, a un intérêt particulier pour les compétences africaines, pour la mise en valeur de l'Afrique par les Africains. Et c'est d'ailleurs pour ça que nous avons associé notre image par mon nom de présence à cette cérémonie, parce que nous voulons valoriser l'Afrique à travers toutes ces interventions. Je pense qu'il est prêt à nous rejoindre ou pas. Il y a un souci. On passe à la suite? D'accord. Alors, il nous rejoindra peut-être un peu plus tard, lorsque ce sera possible. Je vous rappelle que c'est une intervention qui n'était pas prévue. Alors, naturellement, il peut être un peu délicat de se connecter à la dernière minute sur le fil de présentation. À présent, nous allons suivre une intervention en vidéo de M. Todd DeStefano, vice-président de ESIS et qui est administrateur du programme AVAT NFCS. Il est le premier vice-président donc de ESIS Proclaim et responsable de l'activité de responsabilité professionnelle, notamment en ce qui concerne le développement, la croissance, le service à la clientèle, les opérations, la qualité de l'activité de Proclaim. Avant de rejoindre ESIS Proclaim, M. DeStefano était directeur de la pratique des réclamations, de la souscription et des opérations d'assurance de PricewaterhouseCoopers. Avec plus de 30 ans d'expérience dans les domaines de l'assurance, il est membre du conseil d'administration de plusieurs associations du secteur. Il est souvent invité à prendre parole, comme c'est le cas aujourd'hui, et est devenu un leader d'opinion dans le secteur de l'assurance. Il a récemment rédigé des articles et des livres blancs sur les défauts de réserve, les défauts de construction, etc. Je vous demande d'être attentif à sa vidéo qui va suivre dans quelques instants.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this media launch event for the African Vaccine Acquisition Trust's no-fault compensation program for COVID-19 vaccines. My name is Todd DeStefano, and my company, ESIS, a Chubb company, is honored to have been chosen to manage the claims for this program. It is a privilege for ESIS to work alongside AVAT and the African Union Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the African Export-Import Bank, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and UNICEF, and to be part of this important initiative that is delivering COVID-19 vaccines to Africa. I am very proud of the technology solution ESIS has built for this program. We sincerely hope that people do not suffer any adverse effects from the vaccines administered through the program. But if they do, we wanted to make it as easy as possible for them to file a claim. Individuals can file a claim and send all the required documentation through a special web-based portal. Translation software supports our ability to manage claims in multiple languages. If someone has questions, they can call our toll-free hotline or text with a real person through the site. We can pay approved claims in local currency to make it as easy as possible for people to receive payments. ESIS is so pleased to be able to lend our global reach, resources, and expertise to help support this important program that will help ensure widespread access to COVID-19 vaccines across Africa. Thank you again for allowing me to be part of this event.
Merci à M. Todd DeStefano pour son intervention. L'engagement pris par les institutions au niveau continental a été soutenu au niveau local par l'implication des différents États membres à travers notamment l'organisation de campagnes de vaccination et d'autres dispositifs pour permettre la diffusion du vaccin aux populations. Pour la Côte d'Ivoire, cette tâche a été sous la responsabilité du ministère de la Santé, de l'Hygiène publique et de la couverture maladie universelle, avec M. Pierre Dimba, nouvellement nommé d'ailleurs au cours de l'année 2021, qui a assumé cette charge avec brio. J'ai à présent l'honneur de recevoir à ce pupitre le représentant de Monsieur le ministre de la Santé de Côte d'Ivoire, Monsieur le directeur de cabinet, Monsieur Charles Aka Kofi. Sous vos applaudissements, s'il vous plaît.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Madame la vice-présidente de l'Union africaine, Monsieur le directeur adjoint de CDC Africa, Madame la secrétaire exécutive de l'UNECA, Monsieur l'envoyé spécial de l'Union africaine pour l'achat des vaccins contre la COVID-19, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs et les membres du corps diplomatique, Monsieur le Président du Conseil d'administration de Afreximbank, Mesdames et Messieurs de la Banque mondiale, chers partenaires de la santé représentés par l'OMS, l'UNICEF et la Banque mondiale, Mesdames et Messieurs de la presse, Mesdames et Messieurs, je voudrais, avant tout propos, excuser Monsieur le ministre Pierre Dimba, ministre de la Santé, de l'Hygiène publique et de la couverture maladie universelle, qui a vivement souhaité prendre part à cette activité, mais pour une contrainte de dernière minute, m'a donc fait l'honneur de le représenter. La Côte d'Ivoire salue l'Union africaine et ses partenaires, dont l'OMS Afro, Afreximbank et l'UNICEF, pour la mise en œuvre de l'initiative AVAT. Cette initiative qui a été mise en place par l'institution africaine vise à protéger la population contre la pandémie à coronavirus en cours, en particulier avec la mobilisation de 400 millions de vaccins Johnson & Johnson. La Côte d'Ivoire apprécie l'engagement et le leadership fort des chefs d'État et de gouvernement de l'Union africaine dans la lutte contre la COVID-19, en particulier dans la stratégie de vaccination qui constitue le volet essentiel de la prévention contre cette maladie. La Côte d'Ivoire se félicite de la validation par les chefs d'État et de gouvernement de l'Union africaine des recommandations de l'OMS et de l'Union africaine de vacciner 70% des populations de nos pays, ce qui va nécessiter une accélération de la vaccination cette année. C'est pourquoi la Côte d'Ivoire se réjouit d'être parmi les bénéficiaires du programme d'indemnisation des effets indésirables des vaccins reçus grâce à l'initiative AVAT et voudrais réitérer ses remerciements à l'Union africaine pour cette initiative. En effet, comme tout produit pharmaceutique, des effets négatifs non attendus peuvent survenir après administration des vaccins. La gestion adéquate et complète des cas d'effets indésirables notifiés peut rassurer les populations et les encourager à adhérer à la vaccination. Dans le cas contraire, la survenue des effets indésirables, même attendus, avec toutes les rumeurs qui circulent, peut impacter négativement sur l'activité de vaccination. La Côte d'Ivoire s'est alignée aux recommandations de l'OMS et de l'Union africaine en ciblant 70% de sa population, soit environ 20 300 000 personnes à vacciner. Le besoin en vaccins hors dose de rappel est estimé à environ 31 millions de doses, dont plus de 21 millions déjà réceptionnés à ce jour et plus de 9 millions en attente, dont 5,4 millions de Johnson & Johnson de l'initiative AVAT. La commande de la Côte d'Ivoire était de 7,8 millions de doses, dont environ 2,4 millions sont déjà reçues. Pour atteindre la cible de 70%, le pays a adopté différentes stratégies, dont l'extension de la vaccination à tous les établissements sanitaires publics ainsi qu'au secteur privé, notamment les cliniques et les pharmacies. Le renforcement de la vaccination contre la COVID en routine avec le paiement des acteurs à la performance et l'élargissement de la cible aux 12 et 17 ans avec l'accord parental. À la date du 20 mars 2022, 10 599 319 doses ont été administrées avec 6 274 555 premières doses de vaccins administrables en 2 doses et 4 325 562 personnes complètement vaccinées, dont 1 127 915 personnes au moins avec le vaccin Johnson & Johnson. Au plan national, la couverture complète est de 16%, performance qui hisse la Côte d'Ivoire au 3e rang des pays présentant un meilleur taux de couverture. Mesdames et messieurs, dès le début de la vaccination, la Côte d'Ivoire a mis en place un système de surveillance des effets secondaires. À ce jour, 1959 cas de MAPI ont été notifiés, dont 34 cas sévères ou graves pris en charge par le ministère. Une convention vient d'être signée avec la Banque mondiale pour la prise en charge des effets secondaires graves à hauteur de 100 millions de francs CFA. La mise en place de l'indemnisation sans faute par AVAT va rassurer davantage la population. C'est pourquoi la Côte d'Ivoire se félicite de cette initiative et s'engage à y adhérer pleinement. Je voudrais, avant de terminer mon propos, au nom du ministre en charge de la Santé de la République de Côte d'Ivoire, remercier AVAT et tous les partenaires de cette initiative. Je vous remercie.
Merci, monsieur le directeur de cabinet, pour votre intervention. Je peux vous demander de l'applaudir un peu plus fort, si vous permettez. Alors, nous sommes à la fin de notre série d'allocutions pour cette cérémonie d'ouverture et nous allons passer à présent à l'étape protocolaire. Je vais donc inviter de nouveau Monsieur le directeur de cabinet représentant Monsieur le ministre de la Santé à me rejoindre ici même pour la déclaration officielle de lancement de l'initiative AVAT NFCS. Monsieur le directeur de cabinet, si vous voulez bien me rejoindre. J'invite également professeur Orama, président de Afreximbank, à venir également rejoindre monsieur le directeur de cabinet pour la déclaration officielle de lancement.
Monsieur le Président de Afreximbank, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les membres, les ambassadeurs et les membres du corps diplomatique, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, je voudrais, au nom du ministre Pierre Demba, ministre de la Santé, de l'Hygiène publique et de la couverture maladie universelle de la République de Côte d'Ivoire, qu'il aurait fait au nom du gouvernement ivoirien. Je voudrais donc, en son nom, lancer officiellement l'initiative AVAT NFCS au public africain.
On a eu des applaudissements bien nourris qui ne sont malheureusement pas venus de cette salle. Est-ce qu'on peut applaudir pour la fierté africaine? Merci. Je ne pourrais clore cette cérémonie sans remercier vivement, encore une fois, l'ensemble des partenaires qui sont associés à ce programme, l'Union africaine, Afreximbank, la Commission économique pour l'Afrique, Africa CDC, mais également nous adressons nos remerciements à l'ensemble des donateurs qui ont permis le soutien de ce programme, qui ont permis d'avoir le niveau de vaccination qui était prévu, notamment Mastercard Foundation, MTN, les gouvernements des États-Unis, de la France, la Banque mondiale, l'UNICEF et bien d'autres partenaires qui soutiennent encore cette initiative africaine. J'aimerais, à la fin de cette cérémonie, relever quelques petites informations sur le programme AVAT NFCS que j'ai noté, mais je vous invite, chacun d'entre nous, en présentiel ou en ligne, à vous connecter au lien avatclaims.com, tel qu'il est noté. Alors, j'ai retenu, en ce qui concerne les conditions requises pour déposer une demande de compensation, qu'il faut être résident ou citoyen d'un État membre participant, avoir subi un incident médical grave lié à un vaccin COVID-19 reçu dans le cadre du dispositif AVAT, reçu dans un État membre participant, justifier également qu'il en a découlé un préjudice d'un des types couverts par le programme et dont vous aurez le détail sur le site Internet. Le formulaire de demande, le formulaire relatif aux pièces justificatives et aux autres formulaires mis à disposition dans le cadre du programme peuvent être téléchargés en anglais, en français et en portugais sur le site du programme à l'adresse avatclaims.com. La procédure est entièrement gratuite. Il n'y a aucun frais à payer, que ce soit pour le téléchargement des formulaires, pour leur traitement ou pour la prise en charge en cas d'incident médical. N'hésitons donc pas à diffuser cette information le plus possible pour que ceux qui en ont besoin puissent y faire appel. J'ai également retenu de cette session et des différentes interventions quelques points forts qui, pour moi, doivent être encore soulignés, même si je l'ai déjà fait au cours de la présentation. La pandémie a exposé la dépendance quasi totale de l'Afrique au plan sanitaire, qu'il s'agisse de masques, de diagnostics ou de vaccins. Le continent importe aujourd'hui près de 90% de ses médicaments et de ses vaccins. Il va donc de soi que le renforcement de nos capacités de production doit être une priorité. Aujourd'hui, nous devons réfléchir à une véritable solution africaine. Et je vous laisse sur cette réflexion qui me brûle les lèvres et j'aurais voulu interroger plus en avant monsieur le représentant du ministre de la Santé sur ce point. À quand le vaccin africain? À quand cette solution africaine pour l'Afrique? C'est sur ces mots et sur cette réflexion que je vous laisse, que je vais clore cette session, tout en remerciant Afreximbank de m'avoir accordé l'honneur de modérer cette séance. Merci infiniment à tous pour votre présence et j'espère que vous en avez appris énormément comme moi et que vous êtes encore plus engagés pour rendre l'Afrique plus forte. Excellente journée à tous. Merci.